Hi, this is Paula Gloria, and this show is called Farther Down the Rabbit Hole because we like to go into topics more deeply. Today we're going to go into the topic of the grand jury and what this constitutional right means and how it can be applied to a very difficult situation that we actually have guests that we'll be talking about today. But in order to, before we go into the difficult situations, I would first like to introduce all of my guests. Starting on my far right is Jason.
Hi, I'm Jason Berg. I am a resident of Jersey City, a community activist for 45 years. I have run for office for City Council and the Board of Education, and I know that I want to do more for my community, and I'm making change for my community.
And to Jason's left is Pauline. Can you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Pauline Roman, and I'm also a Jersey City resident.
And to her left is Gerard.
Gerard Apoya. I'm in upstate New York, Greene County. I've been active in my local government for many years, and as of late, we've discovered the power of the grand jury that we're trying to resurrect across the state and across the nation.
And last time we taped, my fellow Manhattan Neighborhood Network producer said your words were like water on parched soil. So Lydia,
you are like rain on parched earth. And so my name is Lydia Reed, and I do a live show every Friday here from MNN from 6 to 7 called Crooked Doctors. And what we needed and what you brought to us was we needed a tool that our founding fathers gave us so that we can take our government back, we can take our lives back, we can start driving forward litigation that will heal the wounds that have been inflicted on us. And it's profound, the work that Paula Gloria and Joe Barton do, because this is the essential tool that we needed. You really don't know the change that you're making in people's lives. You're literally saving people's lives.
And I want to, at this point, say I do believe I would have been facing a lot of prison if it wasn't for Lydia, because she was on the phone. I was in Woodstock listening, and she goes, you're being set up, you're being railroaded. She could see different things that were happening, and because of her, I sent a registered letter to the Sheriff's Department and got the police dash cam surrendered. I mean, that was tremendous. So thank you for your compliment, but take the compliment back. And together, and that's the whole point of free speech, together we can start to do what the vision of the Founding Fathers was. So maybe Gerard can tell us about the vision of the grand jury and what the Founding Fathers had in mind, and are we rediscovering it? Because your last paperwork looked remarkably like the Declaration of Independence. And Joe and I, in one of our court cases, had taken the king, struck it out, and put in the corporate United States of America residing in the District of Columbia. And everything fit to a T. I mean, we stuck in paramilitary police because in those days they didn't have all, that apparatus and gear.
Right.
But it was the same thing.
Well, there's really nothing new under the sun here. History keeps repeating itself. I mean, our forefathers, they had something, it wasn't the Patriot Act, but King George told them, if you can't convict them over there, put them on a ship and we'll convict them here. And that's what happened, because everybody in America, the biggest books being sold back then was Black's Law Dictionary. So when the admiral would get a military court going under the king, they would get a jury of their peers and it would be not guilty. And see, that's the basis of the grand jury comes out of common law. It comes out of the Magna Carta. That's what that was. That was 25 men that got together and made the king sign an agreement that was certain basic rights of the people. And that's what this is about. And it's been there forever. Of course, the powers that be, they don't like that oversight because then they don't have complete run over, the people to run roughshod. And what we've discovered is those words are there, but they're being obfuscated. You know what I mean? They're trying to change the meaning of the words. And when we found the U.S. versus Williams case, blew us away because we've been in court with the Board of Election and different things, and you get up to these levels. We were hoping to find some justices, at least up at the appellate level, and we discovered that listen, they don't care, and they don't, I can't believe they all don't know, but if they don't know, they don't care, and so we
Or
kind
they
of...
don't want to know.
Well, they have to know. There's so much, at some point, at some level, they have to know what's going on. Because you can't, listen, there's the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. And today, there's no spirit in the law. There's no discretion. There's no common sense, hence common law. That's what we need to get back to. We need to get back to that spirit of the law. Never mind, they want us to be robots, and the way that prosecutors handle juries today, 150 years ago they would have put them on trial, because they lead them around and they tell them you're only going to find on the case. Never mind, we're not here to discuss the constitutionality or whether the law fits or not. And that's a grave injustice to the American people, grave injustice, because that's how we consent to the law. The people consent to the law through their grand juries, because the grand jury can rule. Listen, they can catch you red-handed doing something and have all the evidence, and the grand jury can still say not guilty because they think the law is being misapplied or they think it's a bad law. And I believe that I had heard that that's why Prohibition went away, because grand juries refused to convict, or indict actually. And so what happens when a prosecutor assembles a grand jury and they don't indict, then he keeps losing. It's not good for his record. So eventually they stopped bringing it. And so that law was actually nullified by the people. And we have to have that right of nullification. And that's what they don't want us to have.
Not to mention the securitization of indictments, because as soon as indictments are made today, that indictment is traded on a bond market. And that's the beginning of our slavery prison system to uphold our economy, which I'm certain the Founding Fathers understood. If you start to deviate away from some of these age-old principles, you're sending a population into slavery.
Right.
And that's what prison is. Your freedom is gone.
Right. And I mean, and how can a judge rule without prejudice when every time he bangs that gavel and puts somebody away, money goes into his retirement account?
Right.
People don't understand that. I think if American people really knew what was going on, they would have rose up a long time ago. I think it was Henry Ford that said if people really knew what was done with money in this nation, they'd be in the streets tomorrow morning. Well, they've managed to keep this at a very low thing that, and so when you try to rest on these common law rights, they look at you like you have three heads, but that's our heritage,
Right.
And they're destroying our heritage, and
So you have an organization called the National Liberty Alliance?
yeah, we set up National Liberty Alliance as a tool for people to plug into, because we discovered, the court system and procedural, we took courses when we went into court. We went into court knowing nothing. We got beat up pretty good. We learned through the School of Hard Knocks. And then we started,
Yeah, we all did.
And we started taking some courses, and eventually we came across the common law. And so when we discovered, that there wasn't much justice in the courts to be had, and about that time is when this Williams case came across our desk.
In 1992?
Well, no, 92 has been sitting there.
yeah.
Right, 92 was the U.S. versus Williams. And the funny thing is that did come across, and we were in the heat of a court battle, and you get too much going on, and you don't always, you don't stick your head up all the time because you have to get things done. So the first time it came across, we kind of looked at it and said, hey, that's interesting, but it didn't click. After we got through all these brick walls, it came back through. And you know what they say, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear? Well, that's what happened.
Can you explain the Williams case for people who didn't see us last week?
Yeah, U.S. versus Williams was a 1992 case, and it was I guess it was a 7-panel Supreme Court case, and Judge Scalia wrote for the winning opinion, and in that he expounded upon the qualities and the methods and what grand juries were about. And I think he did it purposely because, people have forgotten, and it's been pushed aside. So what he was doing is he was creating a record up there in the Supreme Court, which we rely on for cases. When you go up to you and I should not be able to go to the Supreme Court and fight, and both of us find something that upholds our position. that means, hello, Houston, we have a problem. Because that stuff has to be consistent.
Right.
And what you're finding out now, I mean, so U.S. versus Williams really laid out how it should run and the way it should be, and it's in there, and it's undeniable. You know, they can play this game, what is the meaning of is, but it doesn't work because it just, if you read it, you know, they always want to, you know, wiggle over here.
Misconstrue.
Yeah, and use that rhetoric to all of a sudden they got you saying that black is white, you know what I mean? And that's how I believe, they're taught that in their law schools. And, you know, and everything is handpicked that goes up, you know.
Can I just
Yeah, of course.
interject? You're absolutely right, they are taught, because I was invited to an event at NYU Law School, and Supreme Court Judge Sonia Sotomayor was there, and she's running the mock court. And so they're doing the mock court, and I'm sitting there listening. I have a lot of friends, so I can, you know, go to these events if I want to, and I'm listening. And she told them, I mean, she's telling them how to game the system.
Just a second. For viewers out there, when Lydia is saying mock court, you are talking about what most people believe is the real court.
No. This was an event at NYU Law School.
Oh, I got
the
you.
students.
Okay,
For the students, for the law school students.
So it really was a mock court.
No, and they were
okay.
running
Intentional.
it was a practice for the law school students.
So she came down there for
So
that?
she came down, yeah. And she's intimately involved in my case because she sat on the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. And I went to Washington to protest her elevation to the Supreme Court, for which I was punished. But she recently she came to NYU Law School, and for the students, they were doing a mock trial, a mock court. So the students could practice. And when you say they're taught in school to misconstrue and to play, they really are. You do not know what you just said, because I witnessed this. So we have Sonia Sotomayor, who's a Supreme Court justice, and she's criticizing, she's trying to give some constructive feedback to the students, and she says, listen, you never want to be too passionate one side, and I'm paraphrasing her words,
Right.
okay, this is not a direct quote. You never really want to be too strong in one direction or another. You want to like pretend to be reasonable, and again, I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah.
So if you can give something up, you know, and it's a minor point, give it up, because then you look like you're a reasonable person. And I'm sitting there in the audience going, you're teaching these students how to pretend and how to manipulate and how to and how to pretend that they're being reasonable.
With impunity.
Right, and it's like, yes, they really are taught in law school that, you know, she's like, you know, you're going to be out here in the real world, and and you want to pretend that you're kind of being reasonable. So if you've got 5 litigation points and 1 or 2 a week, give them up, because that looks like to the judge you're being reasonable. And I'm sitting there going, do you know what this woman just did? So yes, they are taught, you know, how to play games, how to misconstrue, how to make wholesale fabricate, make things up, and they think, and this is why it's so outrageous, they think that they're free agents. What you're reminding us of is that we own you, okay? We're the people who own you. So, you know, when you make these backroom deals and you create this false, you know, fabricate rulings and you do all this stuff, this is the court system that's perpetrating a fraud against us.
But you actually don't own them when you study the money trail. That's why you've got to look at
tax dollars.
You've got to look at the equity.
It's
But
our
what do you
tax
think? What do you
dollars.
think, Gerard?
Well,
I mean, when you were talking, what
a lot of what they do
what is the meaning
is
of
done
is?
through fraud. In other words, you know, when they get everybody into their system through fraud. They don't tell you when you say, I understand, that it means you stand under their authority, which is their corporate authority. And we've put some of this in our paperwork, you know, because they believe that they're immune from everything. And you can't, if you're running under a corporate charter, as they are, you give up your constitutional immunities, because you can only operate what that corporate charter says. And even under constitutional immunities, you're only okay as long as you stay within the bounds of the Constitution.
Right.
The minute you step outside of that, there's no immunity, you know, when you take it upon yourself to trample on the rights of another person.
Is this the meaning of the copywritten Constitution and the Bill of Rights, where they changed one word and copywrote it? So they say we own that law and what we say rights are? Or that's another argument?
I've heard that, but I never researched it. But there's a lot of word magic that takes place today in the courts and this stuff. And you have to learn it. You have to be aware of it. You have to understand. people many people can't afford attorneys, and they're quite happy to give you one. And that,
More
and
than
because they
happy.
know they can control that money
Outcome.
trail out there, because that's all it's about. And basically, you're like third or fourth on a lawyer's list of who he's loyal to. And so
I have a party
ultimately,
of three.
right. So they look at when a case comes in,
Their
and
interests.
lawyers do this all the time.
Their
Judges,
interests.
they look at how much money's available.
Yep.
And that's going to determine the amount of justice that you can afford.
Exactly.
You get whatever you can buy.
And that's exactly what happened to Pauline Roman. Because she had, I'm just going to say this
Yeah,
real
sure.
quickly.
Explain
Because this
her
is a
case.
real person with a real problem.
Yes.
And, she's facing a real problem. She goes into court. She had 2 police officers and a witness who were willing to tell the judge in her case that she was telling the truth. But her lawyer said she didn't pay him enough. So I'm like, so if she pays you like $1,000, she gets one witness. If she pays $2,000, she gets another witness.
Oh,
That's
wow.
not how it's supposed to. That's extortion, okay?
Yes.
He's supposed to be presenting your case, and your case was very simple. Not only, when you talk about fraud, she's the victim of fraud because it was the judge, Mary Beth Rogers, in Jersey City in landlord-tenant court that perpetrated a fraud upon you. That's why we got Jason Berg involved. He checked out your website, and this is a tool. She's using a number of, she's going to go forward with a plan of action to get justice for herself and her family. She has a many-pronged approach, but one pronged approach is to bring the grand jury system to Jersey City. So Jason Berg, you think that you're just talking out there. There are real people who are following you've distilled down the instructions on your website step by step, and these are real people who are using it. Jason read your website, he called you up, and he is now the Hudson County representative.
Thank you.
God bless you, Jason.
I
Jason,
just speak silent words.
So Jason, you're starting a grand jury in the Hudson Valley?
Hudson County, yes,
Hudson
the most
County.
He's in
corrupt
Jersey.
location in the United States.
Yes.
And how
Very
many people
corrupted
do you
city.
need,
Well,
and what have you decided? And
It's up to, you're
You're just getting started.
We're just getting started. I mean, reading the paper, you needed 25, but again, as we can get 25 through the entire state, and doing that, and we then be able to focus on issues that have been detrimental to everyone in the community. This is not a race issue or color issue or whatever. This is justice and truth and fair play for every citizen in our country.
And specifically with Pauline Roman, because she's going to make sure that she follows through. We have to read the paperwork, there's a process, we're going to do it
Yes.
right.
Right.
But we've got a group here who's giving us, we're going to educate ourselves, educate our children. This is the legacy that you're leaving for your daughters. You're going
Yes.
to bring the common law to, so you can take your life back.
My country back.
So you can take your
Yeah,
country
right.
back,
Right.
so you're not dependent on corrupt elected officials,
Yes.
corrupt prosecutors.
let's explain the case. I'll hold these photos up here as, what should we start on, the mold?
Start with the,
Malik, if you're in the control room, I see he's just
could I do
getting
this
ready.
for like 3 seconds just to get the
Yeah,
broad brushstrokes, and then you
right.
guys can weigh in with some of the details? I don't want to get lost in the details of your case. What we're really telling the audience is, if you're a homemaker with kids, so you're not a politician, you don't have any special training, but you have God-given common sense. And you're an activist with
Right.
common sense. Okay, so if we can do it, you've given us the tools where we can educate ourselves, and we can follow step-by-step instructions to bring the grand jury to Jersey City. Now, Pauline Roman has a real-life problem.
Okay.
She's got...
Malik, can you zoom in on these photos as Lydia explains? She can look at them.
She's got a lot of real-life problems.
We don't have a monitor here, so we don't know. Just do the best you can, and Lydia will keep talking.
She's got a bunch of different issues, and one of the burning issues is that she has black mold in her apartment, and black mold is toxic, and it sends out toxins. Now, her landlord has admitted that there's black mold. The local city health department has admitted, they've done the investigation, that there's black mold. Everybody knows that black mold is toxic and could be mutagenic. She's got 7-year-old kids, so they have to be tested, because if they've been absorbing toxins that could change their DNA, this family has been damaged for generations in the future. So here's the examples, photographs of the black mold. She goes into court to ask the judge. She gets a ruling from the judge that says the landlord must clean up this black mold. And on the day that the black mold was supposed to be cleaned up, the landlord, who really doesn't want to clean stuff up, made up all kinds of excuses, all kinds of stories.
He lied.
He lied
To the judge.
He lied.
And said we wouldn't give access.
And they
so
gave-
we had 2 police officers and a witness to come forward and give a testimony to the judge.
Well, what happened was you had 2 police officers who would testify, they were there that day, that you did not stop the mold cleanup,
Yeah.
and you had witnesses who were willing to come forward. So we go back to court, and the judge, Mary Beth Rogers, I was there, you were there,
Yes, yes.
looked Pauline in the eye and said, Miss Roman, I told you that if you stopped the mold cleanup, you would lose your defense, and I'm going to dismiss this case. But the truth was, Pauline Roman never stopped the mold cleanup. So she's trying to tell the judge, I have 2 police officers who will tell you that I did not stop the mold cleanup. I have a witness in the courtroom who was willing to come forward and testify. I did not stop the mold cleanup. This is very serious. The judge didn't want to hear it. She created a false record by the sin of omission, and the judge perpetrated a fraud on Pauline and her family.
So is the idea that it's cheaper for a landlord to pay off a judge
Yes.
than to clean up the mold? Because
Yes.
I've heard you've had to destroy buildings, that cleaning up black mold is very difficult.
And
Yes.
expensive, yes.
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 So now she's got, she's going to push this through the health department. She's going to embarrass the elected officials at city council meetings. But the legacy she wants to set up, and this is what you're giving us, because
Yes, thank you.
if we bring in and institute
horrible.
the grand jury, then when this happens to another innocent person and they're out there, the system will be
Yes,
set
and
up.
don't be afraid. Come forward, you know, because we need more people like you to come forward to fight this battle and stop the corruption.
There you go. So we're very fortunate that you're giving us a step up. I mean, like, we're in the field. We've got the smoke in our faces. You know, the fur is flying. We're on the front lines here.
I'm just trying to think a little bit on the side of the landlord here. If it's so difficult to get rid of black mold that you really need to destroy the premises and build it up again, where does the landlord get the money for that? I'm just saying ultimately because I study bank fraud, and you really begin to see that the magnitude of the fraud is so deep that it starts to choke out everything, and a lot of landlords lose their buildings.
This
So-
landlord deserves no sympathy because he's not a landlord, he's a slumlord, and he has
That's
a
right.
legal duty to maintain his building. And what he's done is he's bought this building, and instead of making modest investments and working with the tenants, what he did was he let the building decay and didn't make the repairs that he should have made. It's
To
contrary.
try to get rid of tenants, to then remodel it and jack up the
No,
rent?
no.
What was the strategy?
No. He's owned this building for a while, and he should have been making repairs. But what the landlord does is he sucks out as much as he can in rent. He allows the building to decay, to fall into disrepair, till the building itself becomes a weapon.
Like hurt the tenants.
Yeah, because in her case, she had...
How does that, to what advantage is it to somebody who owns property to destroy their
There
property?
isn't. That's why we keep arguing with the landlord. You're paying
Yeah.
thousands of dollars to some attorney to come in to make all these, literally thousands and tens of thousands.
I think there's
Like,
another,
you'd
I think there's
rather
another
pay
story.
the thousands of dollars to an attorney instead of maintain his building.
It makes-
This is his building.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
it's his investment.
so Gerard, if they get a grand jury together, at that point, the grand jury would look at all sides. At that time, Pauline would come in, the landlord would come in and present their
The
case?
grand jury,
How would it
the
work?
way that grand juries investigate is, well, actually, they investigate in secret. They don't have to tell anybody what they're investigating or who the target of the investigation is. So when you come in, and in Williams even goes so far as to say that they're not even entitled to an attorney when they're being questioned by the grand jury, because the grand jury is
Just a second,
an
entitled to attorney, what does that mean?
in other words, when they come in front of a grand jury, they don't necessarily get an attorney that can
course.
speak for them.
Of course,
because
because-
the grand jury is an accusatory body. They're looking for the truth. You know, your attorney rights come in if it's raises to the level of an indictment or a true bill. Then you get those rights. You know, you're going to get an attorney and you're going to be able to defend it with a jury of 12. What the grand jury's job is to sit back and look at all the facts and do some investigating and see if it rises to the level of a criminality or even a report, because that's another thing they don't want the grand jury. Sometimes the grand jury will look into something, it's not quite criminal, but it's a hair's breadth away, and they will make a report reporting that so that it can be fixed, because, you know, and that's especially, it's been argued that that type of a report should be for public officials, not for
Right.
private people, because
Right.
they're held to a higher standard.
Right, and therefore, when I went around with you, Joe and I went around with Gerard and with John as they were presenting. What were you exactly presenting? It was, you called it presentment, and you said, "Dear servants," because you were serving them with
Right,
with
but we
notice.
were-
What were we doing when we went to 6
originally
county
we sent, every
clerks?
county would send in the notices of being constituted, where we elected the process in, and we've documented that using those time-honored things such as, you know, affidavits and notarized signatures and things like that, to bring it up to a public level and have a certain authority and credibility, I want to say.
Right, because one clerk said, well, you know, we don't let just anybody have the keys to the jury room. You could be the Girl Scouts. And I was thinking, that was such a demeaning comment, and I had to process that before I could respond. And I'm thinking to you, one possible response would be, and you're telling me Girl Scouts have no rights?
Right.
You know, because it's really not about some, that we're little people. Each human being has powerful rights. And that, I believe, so you said it's not just that the grand jury is looking for crime, they just want to be assured that there is no crime.
And Williams even says that.
Yeah, so you felt that just our presence going around was a very profound experience, because you could see it had shaken things up. I'll wait until we have a show with Joe, because we have a real-life case here, and I want our viewers to know the nuts and bolts and how this will actually unfold when Jason starts, you know, working on getting 25 people. So you're saying Hudson County, you can get 25 people from outside of the county? Is that right, Gerard?
No. Grand jury, just like the Supreme Court, if you look at their paperwork, it's called the Unified Court System. There's one Supreme Court in New York State, but it has 62 locations. It has a location in every county. Same thing with the grand jury. The grand jury is unified. It's the people. So you can operate in any county in your state. So if you don't have enough jurors in one place, you can pull them from another place in the state. And if it's common sense, it's common law. It's like,
Right. So that means if there's a black mold problem, say in Ulster County or, you know, Greene County, other counties,
Absolutely.
and somebody is motivated to really look at this and really understand it, they could go down to Hudson County when you're forming a grand jury and see
Can you
whether...
cross state lines?
So that, what I'm trying to say is that we're not just dealing with one little
gray
case,
area.
right? Right, Gerard?
Right.
You know, Pauline's case, because 25 people in this day and age, and bus fare and everything being so difficult, it might be difficult to get 25 people.
Well, I don't think so in Hudson County, but what the important thing is, what you want to do is when you've been through like 7 years of hell.
Yes.
I mean, the city government has let her down. The county government has let her down. The inspectors have let her
The
down.
mayor.
The mayors have let her down.
Mayors.
The state attorney general, yeah, you know, the state attorney generals, the feds, you've been, so what we're really looking for is, if you're a person out there, it doesn't matter if we're filming in New York and we're broadcasting in New York, and this particular case is happening in New Jersey, but it doesn't matter where you are. If you're an injured person and your elected officials and your prosecutors and everybody that you depend on is supposed to be helping you doesn't, you don't have to be a victim. You've given us the tools to empower ourselves, and your goal is to get into every single county, lawfully institute the people's grand jury through the common law courts in every county, so you have a place to go. Okay, you can take charge of your life. Now, it's going to take a few, weeks and months for you to set this up, certainly within a year.
Right.
In Hudson County, they're going to do everything they can to stop you, because it's in the state of Jersey. It is one of the most corrupt places.
Yes.
And if you guys show by example that one case can go through, and you're not so much interested in putting your landlord in jail, what you want is restitution. You want the money paid back, the mold cleaned up, you want your kids tested,
Yes.
you want to make sure that your landlord stops.
Gerard, you're so savvy in politics because you've had positions. Isn't there federal funding available to clean up mold?
oh, there's all kinds of funding, but somebody has to sit down and write it. You know what I mean? You
There
wanna-
isn't more legislation right now.
They usually kind of sequester this funding among a good old boy club.
Right.
And they don't actually do what the federal funding
Right.
tells
There
them
might
to.
not be mold, but there's all kinds of other things for refurbishing and doing, especially if you're doing low-income housing or rent control.
Would this be
There's-
some of the conclusion of such, let's say we progress as we wish with Pauline's case, what will that look like, Gerard?
As far as how the grand jury would what a grand jury would do is they would listen to all the testimony, and then at some point they would send down a true bill, because they would take
A true bill.
a true bill, which is a presentment,
That's
which is
what we-
actually an indictment. It is an indictment, but it's an
'Cause I saw
indictment that
true-
doesn't rise
I
out
saw-
of the prosecutor.
Right, I saw a
So-
true bill on our paperwork when we
So
went
what
to the
Pauline
police.
would get is the opportunity that Judge Mary Beth Rogers denied her illegally because she's been depositing her rent money in a separate account to show that she's not a deadbeat, she always pays her rent, and what they did was you deposited, like, over the course of 2 years, about 10 grand, and all of that money was returned to the landlord, and none of the repairs were made. But you would actually, if you called a grand jury, be able to get those 2 police officers to say, you never stopped the mold cleanup. You would get all your witnesses in front of a grand jury, a jury of your peers, to say that you never stopped the mold cleanup, we were there, and I got videotape, and you would get the justice that Judge Mary Beth Rogers deliberately denied you, because she paid the landlord, she gave
Right.
the money property, she gave the landlord money.
Lydia,
She
I
had-
don't want to lose people on the details of her
Okay.
case. I want Gerard to tell us, because I know he and John had their own issues in court that
Right.
they learned, but after they got on to the grand jury knowledge, I was very impressed that they were realizing this is beyond our little case. Not that this is a little case,
no.
but that we're talking about a government that's shut down now. We're talking about national forests that are chasing older people off of property they never thought they'd be chased off of, because they're saying it's national forest and now we don't have the funding to do it. I mean, I personally think the government's shut down for a couple months because they've probably sold off the national forests and they need to get rid of people. You have to sort of see
Right.
some underhanded things going. So how does Pauline's case open the way for not only similar problems, maybe even problems
That's
of all
the
sorts?
point.
How will
Here's the
that
thing
look,
that they're
Gerard?
trying to change, because they don't want we the people's opinion in their, they don't want us in their sandbox, basically. And they've devised everything to go towards this money account. And by a grand jury of we the people coming in, it kind of cuts that, and it really brings things back to basics, because really the grand jury is actually in a position to administer justice too, because they may decide not to write an indictment, but they can bring the parties together and say, listen, this lady needs restitution.
There you go.
You know, I mean, what the judge did was criminal, and can the grand jury go after criminally? Well, if they want to, they can. But in the interest of justice, if we can get everybody together and you get covered and these things get covered and there's restitution, see, that doesn't happen today. You know,
Right.
you get beat over the head and you get
Right.
robbed and everything, and then you go making a report to the police, and then they have you go a lineup, and then you got to go to court and point the finger at the guy and everything. Okay, boom, and they put him in jail, and you leave just as damaged as you came in,
Right.
and maybe worse, because they're
Right.
dragging you through the whole thing over and over again.
Yes.
And then his lawyer's going to try to make it look like you asked for it. You know what I mean?
Right.
So they beat you down.
Yes.
And there's no restitution, and putting that guy in jail is nothing. You know,
Right.
and the thing is
It's
that...
another
Like you're just
opportunity to
gonna
make
be
money.
Right. And
Yes.
if he had to spend the next 3 or 4 or 5 years paying her back for what she lost, and under common law, you know, it's 3 times or 7 times, depending on the crime, of the original,
Wow.
you know. And some of these things, I mean, I don't know how you put a dollar amount, but you don't get crazy, but you know, at least you get something, you know what I mean? You get restored, you get an opportunity. See,
be
then
made whole
To be
again.
made whole, right.
I was just gonna say.
And so the basic principles with common law is, you know, if there's no injured party, there's no crime. You know, we got all this statutory stuff that they keep
Right.
beating on us, and all it's about is making money.
And that's why you can't face your accuser, because there's no crime.
Right, exactly. So I can't tell you how her case would go, because there's too many variables there. But you see, if there's a grand jury that she can come to and tell her stuff, and they can pull these other people in, That's 90% of the problem right there. When they get
Yeah.
a call from the grand jury and you're being investigated and you don't
Yeah.
exactly know why, and then we come in and say, listen, you messed up, you need to fix this, and if you don't fix it, we're going to send it to a jury of your peers.
Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah,
Things will
facts.
actually get done. See, this is the thing about the
Right.
bank fraud and the art, the illusion of money and this debt and credit going around. It starts going out of control, and we have a society where there's nothing productive being done. This is productive. You're
Yeah.
getting people together, and you're solving a problem.
And you're actually bringing the judge in, and the judge gets a chance to say what she did was wrong.
Yes.
So you're actually keeping the community together. And go ahead, Jason.
Well, I just want to add this. With the advent of the technology and teleconferencing and webinars, you can have a grand jury of 25 people in different parts of the state coming together. Because again, it's
Right.
the
They're
establishment has done it via in City Hall
I
and in the Jersey City Board of Education. The person's not there physically, but they are verbally there. So that's how we're going to...
And they swear them in.
That's
And
right.
it's
Yeah.
bindable. So,
I
yeah,
was-
we don't even have to argue the point.
Yeah, I was
Because
down
they're
there at
doing it.
500 Pearl
we are-
Street, and I saw a couple judges online. They came in
And
on
again,
the
we're
TV.
empowering. See, the real thing is empowering the disenfranchised to influence the end of their results. We are the people. We need to be part of the situation. When there is an election, 75% of the people don't vote because my vote doesn't count. They don't do anything for me, but if you don't do anything, you deserve nothing. And I've been for the last 42 years, I've been taking a charge as a voter, as a Democrat, and sometimes I don't like that fact that I'm a Democrat. Basically, I'm a social capitalist, means I am a person who understands money, and I understand community. When money works for the community, you have unity. We don't
Yeah,
have that.
wonderful.
We are disavowed. We're exploded apart. It's us against them. It should be us for us, not us
How
against them.
nice. So you're a social capitalist?
Right.
So you're not one of these that says capitalism is the problem, but rather monopoly? Is that what you're talking about?
I would say that, yes, because,
So
again...
it should be used for the benefit of the
Right.
people, because this is what Henry George said. He said, in hard economic times, the reason you know that it's not capital that's the problem is because interest rates are low. That means there's an abundance of capital. But the rents are so high, and the access to the resources to produce wealth is so restricted that pretty soon everything shuts down.
Right.
So even the monopoly starts to destroy itself. Very similar to cancer.
Right.
You start to have a monotonous, just one thing going.
Free radicals take over,
Yeah.
destroying the body. And that was one radical you don't want to be. But again, capitalism is a tool. It's not a cure-all. But again, it's a way.
of course, of
it's a
course.
way to have leverage. We need a position of exchange. Now, a person's receiving a service for being indigent. But the thing is, that person has a mind. That person can provide a service, be a purpose, be a service to your neighbor. An intelligent person may not be able to go out because he's handicapped to do something, but he can help someone build their emotional strain. We're in a society of
absolutely.
downtrodden. Beat the people down. Beat the people up. I mean, no one's really a man. I'd rather be a poor man with a heart
a man.
than be a millionaire with no heart at all. And that is the commonality. In our life, we need a common
Do
denominator.
you know how the heart gets separated? It's by being a legal fiction. A lot of times, we don't even know when we're in court that we're not even viewed as alive.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? Do you know about that?
That is
Right.
the-
It is your legal
that's the-
fiction. That's why they have your name in all caps.
Yeah.
Right, and you become that paper person, and that paper person, you represent that paper person, but the paper person doesn't exist. But you have to go in there and defend yourself against the corruption of the establishment. Now, I'm not against authority. I'm against the abuse of the authority.
Right.
And when we abuse it, it's time to say, "I'm sorry. It's time to exit." This country is based on freedom. If people go, "Oh wow, I'm free, I can do this," but you are a prisoner. We are a slave to the consumerism of the dominant species of imperialism.
But before we go, like, rolling into
I'm sorry,
into
sorry,
no, that was really good. What you're saying is we're not against authority. We're against the abuse of
Right.
authority. And when you have the abuse of authority, like we have in Pauline's case, what you've given us is one tool of many that you will use so that you can address the abuse of authority. How great is this that you can ask Judge Mary Beth Rogers, because she thinks she's a little queen, that you can actually bring a judge down and say, what you did here was wrong. How do you plan to fix this? And I think that is an incredibly civilized and humane and compassionate thing to do. I mean, we're actually giving this judge a chance to reflect on how she wronged you,
Yeah.
and she knows what she's doing is wrong.
This little-
I've given her the opportunity.
To reverse herself.
Yes.
Have you
She's
talked
so
to her?
in-
Have you
Oh,
talked to her
she-
personally?
I've written to her and I've talked to her.
And when
She's-
you talk to her, what's it like looking at her eyeball to eyeball?
Oh, it's like she just refuses everything. It looks like
Is she cold and frosty
Yes, she
and
is
distant?
cold.
Does she
Very
look at all?
cold.
Does
At
she
some
look?
time I felt like intimidated by her because I felt threatened.
She
Did
uses
you,
it
did you at all? Did you at all feel that you intimidated her?
No.
Do you have any
No.
idea that this little queen may be a puppet for other
Yes.
other powers
that.
above her?
Yes.
That's true.
And
that.
that, and that in
True
order
that.
in order to please her puppet
Yes.
masters,
Yes.
you have to be the sacrificial
Yes,
victim.
because
Yes.
ultimately,
because
yes.
I saw your
Like they want me
eyes.
to go like sheep to the slaughter.
Yes.
Yeah, because I saw your eyes as you were looking when Gerard was explaining what they put you through. Even if you've been wrong, they drag you through to the lineup and look at this and look at that. But they never really seem to have an interest in making you whole.
Yes.
And you can tell, because I was in the courtroom, just because ultimately if you're going to sue, and you have a number of different ways to try to get restitution, but if you sue in federal court for denial of equal protection of the law, ultimately what you might have to sue, and this speaks to the puppet masters, you're not going to sue Judge Mary Beth Rogers personally, although you probably will, because you can sue judges, but you will be suing the town or the corporation of Jersey City. And all what will happen is corporate counsel, who's William Massacutis, you will have to sue him in his official capacity and personal capacity. And he's interested in protecting his personal wealth. He doesn't care about you. He doesn't care about the wrongs that he committed or the city or the judges committed as part of a corporate.
And it all could have been avoided if they enforced the landlord to maintain the building.
Which makes absolute
There
And
must,
let
there
me
must
add
be a
this.
deeper problem. You've got to start looking at federal funding, and I'm sure Gerard has had a lot of experience. Gerard, would you say you didn't advance in politics because you just refused to be corrupt? Because you obviously
Well, I didn't
had
advance
the-
because when I found corruption, I tried to fight it, and that's a no-no. You know what I mean? They wanted, and it happened. I was a Republican, and it happened to be a Republican problem. And I was a Republican, and the supervisor was a Democrat, and that didn't, sit well. That here's a Republican going after another Republican as if I'm going after my brother or sister, which yeah, there's some camaraderie there, but when the law is being broken.
So what did this mean to you? Because I know you had a lot of aspirations and you had a lot of people behind you. You were voted in to fix problems. What was discovering?
As far as getting voted in, here's the deal. And one fella came up to me after I was elected, and he said, "Now don't think they voted you in." He said they voted them out, and that's the truth. Because when you come in at the right time, people want to change, and that's how we get a lot of change in this country, because people are sick of the other administration, so they'll put anything in. Not to say that I was just anything. When I came in on the heels of a long administration, and everybody, and even some of the perceptions they had about that administration were not right, but they had been there so long, it was perceived that there were things going on. It was time for a change. And so I got in. Now, I was very outspoken. And as soon as I was elected, they do the same thing they do to everybody. They put their arm around you and they say, well, now you're elected, so you represent all the people. Like you said, you have to make believe like you're doing everything. So you have to lay your principles back a little bit. You see, and that's hard for me because I'm a very principled person. For me, you know, if it's right or it's wrong. I know there can be gray, but the thing is I navigate that gray with my principles. That's what you're supposed
No,
to do.
I mean, the hours and hours we spent going to 6 counties and to serve the clerks. He told me about one time where a clerk's child, a son or daughter, was in the backyard burning up boxes of paperwork because she had given him the job of filing it, and he decided it was too much trouble.
Unbelievable!
This is what
and
he
these
saw.
are
He
these are
witnessed
just
it.
this is nothing.
This is
compared-
nothing.
This is nothing. This is little small town political stuff. I mean, it hurts people, you know, when you're looking
I
for
think
your
there's
records.
small town stuff here in New York City.
Oh, all the
Political
time. I mean,
stuff.
this is just the tip of
You
the
know,
iceberg.
at the Supreme Court, I'd go down and my original files weren't there. I could tell by some of the clerks were just like really, truly puzzled.
Right,
You know,
right.
I said, you know, you're going to be seeing
In
more of me,
Jersey
and you're going to be
it's the
seeing more
same.
weird things with this case.
But you see, the people,
Yeah, I know.
there's an unspoken conspiracy. It's not a conspiracy that they sit down and speak about.
Right.
But when your role models up top, like these top judges and stuff, when they're doing bad things, the people down below catch on right away. They don't have to say anything. They conduct themselves the way that they see the top conduct. They already know that goes right down through the whole system to the bottom guy. And that's what you get. You only get a system that's as good as the top guy, unfortunately.
Right.
You know what I mean?
The trickle-down theory.
A fish rots from the head down.
Right.
That's
And
how the
so
Chinese would put it.
That's what happens, and so you get, you know, and then people get lazy and things get left to go, and before you know it, you got a big mess. They used to have a show on Discovery, they called it Seconds from Disaster, and they would show airplane crashes. They would show how this little thing stacked on this little thing. They're all little things, but when you put them together in a chain, the plane blows up. This big, huge
Right.
thing with 400 people on it, you know? And I always said, these towns and these cities, they're running on a fence, seconds from disaster. How they don't fall off on one side or the other, well, I know how they don't, because they got safety nets. And
They got the police, they got tickets.
Right.
You know.
And really, it's amazing to me that it's gone as long as it has, as deep as it has, without a major blow-up, you know?
Because I think it's people's goodwill and faith.
Did you want to say
Right.
that?
Yes, I just want to say that I want to thank you very much for doing what you're doing with the National Liberty Alliance. We are here, and not to be masters, we are here to be master teachers and learners. When we take what you have given us and distribute it freely to the people, we have more control. We are more dangerous because we are not owing to them.
Right.
We are saying what our ancestors, our founders did. And the really funny thing, this government is more Native American than we want to give credit for.
Sure. Well, that's
And the word council came from Native American Indians.
Right.
Democracy, as we know it, came from Native
Do you
Americans.
have any Native American in you?
No, I'm a spirit of a Native American.
Yeah.
But
Right.
I'm part in New Jersey. I'm a part of the New Jersey and New York Lenape tribe. I don't know which particular of the 3 tribes I would be part of, but that's my spirit.
Well, Joe learned his laws starting with a man who drove through town on his way in Woodstock, on his way to search for the missing 13th Amendment in old libraries up in Maine and Vermont, where he found them. And when he was in Woodstock, he had cardboard license plates that said Algonquin Territories. He got arrested, but at that time, I think this was in the early 90s, he knew enough law to really shake the town, and I heard he got $250,000 for a false arrest.
Because
But it's because he knew law.
Because he was also in Guaca.
Well, he was just kind of honoring the vibration of the land itself.
Right.
So like I'm saying, even when I asked you if you're Native American, you can kind of get it through the genes, or you can get it through just being really sensitive to the area where you are, and what really works for a plant being healthy also works for us being healthy.
Right.
They talk about the elder women being the ones that elect the leaders.
Right.
And this is done because they knew these men that, you know, it's men that run the show, but it's the women that decide which men run the show because they watched them when they were playing as children.
Right.
They knew who the bully was, and they knew who the one was that would be most generous and sharing with others. That would be the one that you would pick to make the most sensitive decisions, and you put the bully you keep them busy somewhere else. Hopefully our bullies are remembering in the police department that there's a Constitution and a Bill of Rights. When our editor, he put his Metro card in and it wasn't working, it didn't work twice, so he's already down $5. He finally hopped the turnstile because he had to get to work and figured if they came along, he would just prove it, He would, look at this turnstile doesn't work. Well, they took him into custody and he knew that hopping the turnstile, ladies and gentlemen, takes a disadvantaged person right to Rikers Island today. So he was in the Tombs all night. We called up because we were panicked because he had a $5,000 computer. So Joe got on the phone, and Joe has a very authoritarian way about him, and he said, we want you to know that's a $5,000 computer that you're holding. And they say, yes, 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 don't worry, it's all locked up. But, the police are stealing in their things. So then Joe said, and forget the $5,000 computer, there's TV shows on it that it's even more important. Well, Daniel got out the next day, but boy, did he have stories to tell us about the black kids. They just say, it's hopeless, we're profiled. I mean, jumping a turnstile, and then you have to figure, who owns the MTA? I wasn't even talking to the police. When I brought up the Constitution, her reaction was so severe, then I looked and I realized it was the 14th Precinct Transit. But it has nothing to do with the police department. It's their own security system. It's a private corporation that's taken New York City's right to travel freely and monetized it and really is holding the whole city hostage. He couldn't go to his job that day, and money's tight for everybody. It was a big setback. He was in a tuxedo, by the way.
By the way, you really brought up an interesting part about the women making the choice. The Lenape Indians, actually, the women were the higher monarchy inside the family, and they ruled. If a woman wanted to divorce a husband, she just threw him out of the longhouse, and he was out of it. And the Native American Indian Lenape was the first tribe to sign a peace treaty with our forefathers. And what did they get for it? They got burnt out of what they were supposed to. They were supposed to have a seat in Congress. And this is outrageous because, again, our spirit is Native American, but our heart is but our mind has been corrupted by Europeanism.
Mm-hmm. Unless we could go back to the roots of European and see even that's been corrupted, because it seems as though you've got this kind of veneer of respectability with a bar association that's running a closed union shop in these courts, ostensibly because you don't have, enough eloquence and education and refinement and culture in order to even speak in these courts. Isn't that the idea of having somebody represent you?
Right.
Because you're incompetent.
That's right. Yeah.
So if you're
It's
a ward,
degrading.
so that means you've totally given over your fate to somebody else.
I wouldn't say that the average person is incompetent. It's the
most people take a public defender, and that in the eyes of law, that's why you have no rights.
The public
You've given
defender
them up.
can only defend somebody who's a ward of the state or incompetent. So when you take the public defender, you're automatically assumed to be. That's why they don't let you talk in court, because you've put
When
him
I
in
said
your
I
place.
didn't stand under the charges, it was just click, click. He was so happy. Oh, Bellevue, I can't remember. It wasn't Bellevue up there in Woodstock, but it was whatever the mental hospital was.
They were going to drop you in that psych ward?
And
Yeah,
Joe,
they do. That's
the judge could tell this was a newbie, he wannabe public defender. I mean, he just lost a job. I fired him. That was the first thing I did.
They were going to stick you in a psych ward?
They were going to say, if I didn't understand the charges, I must be incompetent. So he was just so happy. Well, we can always send her over here.
Over the spirit of
Joe, of course, Joe, my hero, he just steps in and he said, "You what?" And the judge backed off on that one. But that had people been less informed. That's why we say, don't do this, ladies and gentlemen, at home unless you understand what you're doing. Because if you say you don't understand the charges, and you don't understand what you're saying, they could slap you in a mental
You need to explain
just
it and say, I don't
basically,
stand under.
don't sign anything. Just
Right.
don't sign anything. And Joe says, agree to nothing.
To bring up H.G. Wells in 1984, we have Newspeak, and rewriting the news and rewriting the history.
Exactly.
And that is what we are here. I mean, here we have a science fiction writer talking about the past in the 50s and in 1984, and we've seen everything come together. The rewriting of the history, a Big Brother is coming together. It's just, everything is happening, and we don't need to be sheeple. We
No,
need
we
to
don't.
be people.
Right.
We need to take action. If you don't do anything, you are bound to serve your own demise.
And that's why what you're doing is so profound in Jersey City, and I think we have like 3 or 4 minutes
Yeah,
left. Because you are doing something. You got the information, it's been laid out on the website.
The
You're
website is nationalalliance.org.
National Liberty
I'm
Alliance.
sorry, National Liberty Alliance. NationalLibertyAlliance.org.
I'm glad you brought up Newspeak because, and we'll get more into this, because that's exactly what the judges did to us when they said there's no provision in New York State for a common law grand jury.
Nonsense.
And what they did was they quoted Article 1, Section 14 of the New York State Constitution. And in there, it says that they claim that it says that the common law was clearly supplanted by the legislatures.
Yeah, they didn't use the word usurp, did they? But that means the same thing.
Right, and that's an
Supplanted.
impossibility. And then if you go to Article 6 of the New York Constitution, it says that the grand jury shall never be diminished by law or statute. So right in our own Constitution, there's a conflict, and they're telling us we don't have to let you in because that stuff is
It's
dead.
been legislated away.
That's right, it's been legislated away. So they didn't want us to get that memorandum because now...
Are you sure they didn't want you to?
Oh, yeah,
Joe
because
and I
they...
have been talking about that.
No, well, in other words, they sent this memorandum around, and when somebody went into, I think it was Nassau, they read her the memorandum, and she said, "Can I have a copy of that?" And they said, "Well, you'll have to FOIA request it." So she said, "Good," and she did it. And they got a response within 3 days, which is highly unusual.
This
And
is
the
news to me.
And the response was, "You're not entitled to that document. It's an internal court
I
paper."
could tell you
Now, this is
stories
to the
about
grand jury.
that.
This is the grand jury. Of course, it's still not the grand jury.
What, that's the secret court?
Well, yeah, and so we ended up getting it because
Good.
somebody gave it to us because,
People
you
were
can't...
scared, Lydia. People were
Some of the
scared.
people, I think, really were hoping that we did it. I mean,
Yeah,
even the
yeah.
police officers, we didn't have all bad experiences. Some of
yeah,
it was
yeah.
actually good. They shook my hand. They said, "I hope that you do something," because, listen,
'Cause they see it worse than
everybody's
you
fed
do.
up. So in the paper, if you go online and you read that memorandum, we break down what they're referring to was when this state came into the Union, they already had laws. They had a constitution. It was 1775. They weren't a bunch of barbarians. This country, there was been here for 300 years before we won our independence. So when New York State came into the Union, they wrote in there, they said, all the laws and the statutes and the common law that was in existence before this Constitution, we're going to bring that forward. But anything that's abhorrent to this Constitution will be null and void.
Of course.
They said, and the legislators have the right to make changes from time to time in that law, because they use the word concerning the same. So what
Right.
they said is that law that they brought forward, that was part of the common law, part of treaties, statutes, things that were still in effect that didn't expire yet. They said, we'll let that come into the new Constitution.
You
And
have
the
30
legislator
seconds.
has the right to make changes to that law, not forever. You see, they
That's
newspeaked
wonderful.
it.
Okay, so in the
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This has been Farther Down the Rabbit Hole. We've had an excursion into the grand jury, and stay tuned. We're going to have Gerard and Lydia and Pauline, and we're going to follow the case with Jason. He's going to be forming a grand jury. So please go to nationallibertyalliance.org,
Right.
learn more about it yourself, and become involved, because despite all the dire things, there's hope. Thank you.
Thanks. Boy, we went
Thank you.
around the world and back, didn't
I
we?
know.
No, but that was
So
very
what's the- wait, let's change the